Welcome to Mind Your Small Business, a brand new podcast from AXA which makes starting or running a business easier. This week we're going to chat about the stuff that greases the wheels of any business. It's not sexy, but it sure is pretty important. It's all about accounting and cash flow. I'm Gordon Rutherford from AXA, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Dominic Livingston and Khawar Jamil Rasool, known as KJ. Dominic launched his design and creative business D24 9 years ago in 2012. KJ's business, O5 Media, is even longer in the tooth, launching in 2010. So, good morning, Dominic and KJ.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's begin by finding out a little bit more about what you both do. So, starting with you, Dominic, please tell our listeners a little bit about D24 and why you started it.
Sure. So, I design pretty much an array of different digital products and experiences and services for clients. So that could be working with agencies and their clients, working with my own direct clients, and working with kind of bigger brands or different kind of companies across different industries. So that could be designing platforms such as websites, apps, different digital tools that are kind of customer facing, as well as providing kind of assistance to clients from a creative direction standpoint. So helping them bring their ideas to life, ensuring that the ideas are cohesive and engage well with their customers, and they're able to target the right customers in the process. So yeah, that's what I essentially do.
Okay, interesting stuff. And KJ?
Zero4 Media helps businesses to generate clients and leads. When I started off, actually, it was kind of a need where I had to make money. That was the reason behind starting this business. I had to make an income and stuff like that. And yeah, that's how that was the main reason, basically, to make money.
Okay. It's a topical subject today then, because it's all about money that we're going to be talking about. And as we often do, we'll start with some data. According to Intuit QuickBooks, 1 in 7 small business owners in the UK are currently unable to pay employees because of cash flow issues. And a report from BACS, the Payment Schemes People, states that 34% of business owners who experience late payments say they have to rely on overdrafts to keep them afloat. And finally, our own research at AXA found that 43% of businesses will need help and advice to get their business back up and running post-COVID. It's clear that cash flow is the lifeblood of any small business. So, Dominic, kicking off with yourself today, what do you find is the most difficult aspect of cash flow?
I would say for me, and I completely agree with those stats that you've kind of shared just there, because they are a very true reflection of the current times. But I would also say it's been that way for some time too, in terms of just the business and the changing of the landscape of how payments are dished out. But I'd say for me, in my industry, the biggest challenge with cash flow is knowing as and when your clients are going to pay you, because with the scale of projects that are being done, sometimes invoices aren't always paid on a month-to-month basis, depending on the engagement and the nature of the business. So knowing when that money's going to come in is very crucial, and that isn't always clear, as much as you try to make that kind of conversation as clear and as visible as possible at the contract stage. But I would say that's the biggest difficulty of knowing how do you balance, like you said and mentioned, the overdraft aspect. How do you balance your expenses, the contractors you have to pay, your employees, with knowing when that cash is going to come in? And you don't want to be, in a situation where you're paying charges for the sake of that. So for me, that would be the biggest challenge, is knowing the time commitment of what you're kind of spending towards a project, and knowing when that return will come in, and making sure that you can, meet your obligations as a business.
Sure. And I mean, we have a really, really beautiful link here to what you just said and last week's episode, when we covered work-life balance and well-being, because we spoke last week about the whole feast and famine element, and the fact that, when you are self-employed, you can go through cycles of having a lot of money dropping in your bank account at one particular point in time, but then perhaps nothing for months, which makes cash flow quite a challenge mentally to cope with when you're not used to that kind of thing. I mean, staying with you, Dominic, your business has been going for a wee while now. It's about 9 years. You've obviously had that amount of time to A, get used to that, and B, build up a reserve. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is absolutely fair to say. And I would say it hasn't always been the case where I've been able to build up a reserve, but that has always been the goal. Like, that has always been the kind of objective. Learning about, like you said, the payment cycles is very crucial. And that's the thing I try to do in terms of being tactical about what projects I take on, in the sense understanding, when money's coming in and out on a monthly basis, making sure that the dates align, and, being flexible with client requirements, because obviously they run their own business too. They have their own, costs and cash flow issues as well as we do. So you want to try and find a nice kind of middle ground to make sure that the business and the work that you're doing isn't causing too much disruption to either of you from a cash flow point of view.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. And turning now to you, KJ, staying in that theme of the feast and famine challenge of cash flow, I mean, is this something that you also experience in your business? And if so, how do you cope with that?
Well, it happens, and that happens to all kind of businesses, and in our field, it's same. I think the biggest thing is you should know when to cut down your expenses, and knowing when to pull the plug. So because in this, sometimes when you're spending on advertising, you don't know when to stop. Whereas you have to look at your obligations. What are your obligations and what is your incoming? Again, just like Dominic, we have to look at when customers are going to pay up, if they can pay on time or not, and based on that, we have to look at what all obligations are and what time we have to make a payment and all that. And then another thing is growth as well. When I have noticed another challenge is when you're trying to grow and you kind of overspend without looking at how much you can spend and all that. That can negatively affect as well. So keeping a balance, between spendings and making sure you don't overspend, because in digital advertising, in one day you can easily spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds. So you have to maintain that balance. And another thing is, like, if you have some sort of budget, some sort of fund separate for these kind of rainy days, that always helps. In my case, that's what helped me to float all these times, having a separate budget to use reserve fund, which you can use whenever you feel like it.
No, I mean, I think you're right, KJ. And I guess in many respects, it's no different from managing a domestic budget. Where you have your incomings, maybe in your wages from your employer. And you have to balance your outgoings against, what's coming in. Otherwise, you have a long-term problem. And I think you're right in the sense that, especially when you're more experienced as a self-employed person, you can have control over these things, and you learn how to manage them, and you've got reserves and things like that. But I guess when you start out being self-employed and you're just embarking on this journey, and it's all new to you, and you are dealing with clients, some of whom are good payers and stick to the payment terms, and some of whom are not. And that's an external problem that you might not necessarily be able to control yourself. KJ, how do you deal with clients who don't pay you within the 30 days or the 60 days that you've stipulated in your invoice?
Okay, well, first of all, what we do is before we start working with clients, we try to make sure to assess them and see if they can afford our services, and then if they are paying on time. And another thing what we do is when we take on a client, we make sure that in case they can't pay up, we can still keep our expenses running and all that. So we don't give them that big of a gap. Or we don't leave, especially when dealing with new clients, we don't just work out on big invoices with them. We try to keep it small and slowly build that confidence. That's something which really helped us, because in advertising, it's totally different game. Within a few days, you can have hundreds of thousands of pounds, and which you have already spent. So budget depends. But what we do is, first of all, look at the client's size, if they can afford it, if they can do it, and then that could be, by the way, you can easily assess that by on your when you have a call with your client and have a look at their situations, what they have been doing, how much they have been spending, and all that. When you ask these questions, you can see that what is their financial standing, and if they are a great fit for you or not. And if they are high risk, then you have to make sure that you get some sort of payment from them upfront to cover your costs and things, and later on maybe charge 50% after you have delivered your services.
Wise words, really. But I guess when you're starting out and you are needy, you're desperate for business, you're desperate for clients, sometimes you are maybe reluctant to do any kind of due diligence on the financial affordability of the client, just in case it brings a result that you don't want. So I kind of understand how people at the start of their journey can start dealing with potentially clients who are going to take a little longer to pay. I want to kind of move on to something that we touched on in an earlier episode when we discussed taxation, and that is people's ability to cope with these things and do these things effectively. And clearly managing the books doesn't come naturally to people, certainly not to all people, especially if you're coming from a different background, like a creative one, for example, Dominic, like yourself. I mean, how did you effectively teach yourself this financial side of the business?
So I did a lot of reading and spoke to as many people as possible, because in the line of work, like you perfectly said, being a creative person coming from a creative background, the financial aspect is never really the most fun thing for creative people to do, but it's so necessary. And for me, it was sitting down and speaking to people to try and understand, like, how does a business function, but then how does a creative business function, and what are the kind of financial necessities. And by doing that, I was able to kind of sit down with an accountant at the time and just basically explain how my business would operate, how money would come in, how money would go out, how often the kind of payment cycles would be, and then basically reflect the reality of, these are the kind of obstacles and challenges I'm facing. So, one of the things that I integrated into my service experience, and just like KJ explained perfectly, integrating a 50% deposit was super crucial for me, because it gave me that kind of leeway and that certainty to make better financial informed decisions. But a lot of it is trial and error, and you do have to spend time listening to people who are experts at that topic and learn from them about the best practices, how you implement the day-to-days in terms of processes, but then also making sure that what you're doing within your business is also reflective with the kind of HMRC kind of point of view in their framework, to make sure you're not creating too much work for yourself when it does come time to pay tax, when it does come time to, submit your tax return and accounts. So it was very challenging at the beginning, because the access to information when I started out freelancing and starting my own business was very minimal. And now there's so many voices that are kind of sharing insight and great wisdom to people who want to start out now. So I believe, finding kind of trustworthy resources, but also voices of wisdom within that sector are brilliant to consult on in terms of that topic.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. And, I want to perhaps risk ripping off an old elastoplast here and having a look at the wound that lies underneath, if I may. And you can say no to this if you want, but are there any big mistakes that you want to share on the basis that it may help others avoid making the same ones, Dominic?
Yes, absolutely. For me, it was I'd say the biggest mistake that I perhaps made early on in my career was when invoices were coming in, not kind of deducting the mental tax that would be kind of implicated straight away. Because at times when you're kind of dealing with that income and you're trying to, the first thing when that income comes in, you're thinking about your expenses, but you also got to think, I've got to put some aside first and secure that whilst making sure that I can attain to these expenses. So I'd say that is the trickiest mistake, because every kind of business is at a different size, is at a different point of their growth, and assessing, what's the right amount to put aside is very specific to you. And that was something that I made a mistake on several times, and my accountant helped me improve that. So I would say that's my personal experience on that.
And that is such a nugget of information. When you get an invoice, at some point down the line, you're going to have to pay tax on that. So it's not an idea to kind of squirrel some money away somewhere. Turning now to you, KJ, was finance something that you were comfortable dealing with when you set out on your journey? And if not, how did you get up to speed?
Not at all. Definitely no. Again, I will agree with Dominic that when you are, in a creative field, or when you are in a one field, you have to invest all your time into that, and you can't be, expert in all these fields. Especially when you're running a business, you have to be master at so many other things. So finance is not one of those for me. So actually I had to look out for other people in the industry and see how they are managing finance and all that, and take advice from them. That's how I actually learn a few things from them, how to manage taxes, how to manage everything. And then I spoke with my accountant, sat down with him, and told him exactly what my business model is, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to receive payments and everything. And based on that, we started building relationship. And that's, but still, it's mostly accounting. In finance, I just know a little bit where I have to know things.
Okay, thanks, KJ. And I mean, both you and Dominic now have mentioned that you rely on the services of an accountant in your business, which is unsurprising given the maturity of your respective businesses. Would you say that every business needs an accountant to help them manage their annual accounts and their cash flow and things like that?
Definitely, 100%. Because accountant is it's their field, so they can know way better than as a business person, and especially when you're running business. I feel like you have so many other things going on that it's better to leave that with professionals and just focus on what you are good at. That saves your time as well, and make sure that the job gets done perfectly.
Dominic?
I absolutely agree with that. And it's something I like constantly having kind of dialogue with my accountant about different challenges and different things. Like, just this week I've been doing some work with an agency in the US, and, that presents different challenges in terms of, the types of paperwork that needs to be done, what types of precautions I need to put in place. And being able to consult in someone like KJ said that has that wealth of knowledge and just can answer questions so proactively and seamlessly is invaluable to business. And I think because there are some people who in businesses that may go off and venture into a new world, whether it's marketing, advertising, whatever it may be, but then do have a background in finance or do come from a family or a social group of people who know that world very well. But definitely, the access to those minds, I believe, from my personal business, is crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is the case, and I really actually liked the thing that KJ said, because it frees you up to concentrate the things that you should be doing. And certainly, I was self-employed for about 5 years, and the amount of time I used to spend, I used to do my VAT returns myself and things like that, basically because I thought, well, it's going to cost too much money to hand this over to an accountant and things. And I would spend a whole day doing it, where it would take him 10 minutes sort of thing, and that was a day where I should and could have been doing something far more productive. But anyway, many of our listeners today are people who are thinking about going out on their own, and setting up their own business. And one of the great things about speaking to you guys today is that you've both been there, you're both established, you've come through that initial challenging period, and you're stable and you're established. But what do you wish you had known about accounting and cash flow before starting your small business, Dominic?
For me, it was the managing of cash flow, so how important and crucial that is. So, the kind of the invoicing process, the payment cycles, understanding payment cycles in different lines of business. Because in my world, depending on who I work with, there are different payment terms that these companies have. Some companies paying 14 days, some paying 30 days. And when you're jumping from different projects, your expenses don't really change every month and the dates don't change, but then the way that the money is coming in does change. And I wish I knew that from the very beginning, because the tools and software that I now have today, I didn't or perhaps couldn't afford at the time. And by having access to those now, it enables me to make more informed decisions. But then I wish I knew sooner of, like you said, like with your VAT example, who should I go to? Like how do I kind of surface these questions, and how do I prevent mistakes from happening? Because like you're in that conscious mindset of like saving costs and trying to minimize risk in the same way. But I wish I knew more about the balancing of cash flow, the revenue, the taxation aspect is what I would kind of refer to.
Sure. And the same question for yourself, KJ?
Yeah, I wish I knew how to keep a balance again, and when to pull a plug, how to manage everything. Because sometimes that was one of my biggest mistakes as well. When we are scaling, when I could see things went well, I kind of lost track of incoming, how much I'm going to make, and we sometimes ended up overspending. So if these are the few mistakes which we made in the past. So I wish if I knew how to keep a balance, that would have been amazing.
Okay, fantastic. And some great answers from both of you there. And it's interesting because I guess if, I opened that question by saying there will be people out there who are thinking of starting a business, and that's why they listen to these podcasts. Potentially what you've said, I guess, could be off-putting to someone who might be sitting at home thinking, I would never grasp that. I would never be able to grasp the kind of thing you've just spoken about. What would you say to people thinking of starting a business who are really, really nervous about the finance aspect of it?
I would say go for it, because I was very conscious about it being a dyslexic. I was very concerned about not having the mathematical kind of mind and point of view, but I learned it, and it was a skill, and I was open to learning from people that knew more than I did. And it's things you can learn. There's skills that you can adapt, and it is a matter of trial and error. Like when you're working in your area of business, there are things you're going to know and there are things you're not going to know. And that's the beauty of the kind of unexpected journey. And I think when you're passionate about what you want to do, you'll learn as you go. And I think everyone's going to be nervous from the very beginning. Like it's the whole point. You want to succeed. You want to do well. You want the people who you may be creating the business with you to do well too. So it's natural emotions, but it's a journey. And I think as and when you get into the kind of momentum of it, like KJ said, when things are going well, you start to enjoy and you start to kind of appreciate the hard work that you've put in to get to that point. But I would say go for it, but be wise, make good decisions, and do consult with people that have the right advice to give.
That's a beautiful answer. And just staying with you, Dominic, going kind of further down the chain. So not thinking about people who are considering starting a business, but actually thinking about people who have started a business, say, for example, in the last 12 months, and maybe they're struggling with small business accounting or cash flow. What advice would you give to them?
I would say keep your eye on how things are going. Make sure that you're with your business, you're choosing a bank provider that can help you, manage your money better. And that was something that I made a decision just before kind of going into the lockdown around how do I get access to a bank that helped me kind of make better financial decisions and give me better visibility and, constant kind of communications and updates on how much cash there is, what's coming in, what's going out. And I think that would be the best advice I could give, because depending on the nature of their business, there are obviously going to be different requirements and things that will adjust and change to that. But then also keep your receipts and keep your invoices closed and try to stay organized, because when things do go well and things do get busy, like KJ said, you do spend a lot more time focusing on what you're good at, what you're talented at and what you're passionate about. But you still have to kind of make sure that the invoices are coming in, the paperwork aligns, the invoice dates are correct, and the invoice numbers and all that stuff are tip top and in shape and sharp. So I would say, stay on top of stuff, but, keep an open mind to keep learning.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. And KJ?
Yeah, well, my advice would be that, first of all, speak to your banking providers, speak to your bank, and see if they can, how they can help you out. Don't hesitate to seek help. If there is a government scheme or things like that, make sure to check that. Look at your banking institution and see if they can help you out, or something like that. But yeah, and stay on top of things, as Dominic said. Make sure that you have everything in place, all your invoices and everything is in place. And yeah, these ups and downs are kind of it's noble for business. That's how things work at times. So yeah, I'm sure these times can pass easily as well. If any businesses have a difficulty, they'll have good days as well. So just wait down for the good days.
Because they will come. And that's really good advice. It's like any walk of life. There are ups and downs, and there's bumps in the road, and it's how you deal with them, I guess, that makes the difference. So thank you, Dominic and KJ, for some outstanding insight today. It's been great to speak to both of you. You're two guys who have kept your respective ship on course for roughly a decade, so you're obviously doing something right. As always at this point, I always have 2 or 3 key takeaways. I have got plenty of them today, so many of them, and so many really insightful little pieces of gold dust. And one of the things that you've both spoken about is speaking to the right people. I love what you said at the end there, KJ, about seeking help. This is something that comes up in every single episode of this series, this podcast, where no matter what the topic is, people always say, speak to somebody else. And, occasionally that's just speaking to a family member or a friend and sharing the load. But certainly for accounting and finance, seeking help is about speaking to the right people. That may be an accountant, it may be your bank. Stay focused on the cash flow, watch where the money's coming in, watch where it's going out, pay more attention to it than you would to your normal day-to-day bank account, I guess. I loved what you both said about keeping your receipts, because we've all been there at the end of the year when it's time for the tax return and you're going squirreling about in shoeboxes looking for old receipts and things like that. So be organised, be structured. Remember to put money aside from your tax for your tax bill, which is going to come in, and remember to do your due diligence on any kind of clients to make sure that the work you are done is going to get paid for at some future point in time, because ultimately if it's not going to get paid for, there's not really much point in doing it, I guess. All that's left to say today is a massive thank you to Dominic Livingston and KJ Rasool. Dominic, how can people find out more about D24?
Sure. So you just visit my website at dominiclivingston.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, pretty reachable. You can email me, drop me a message on LinkedIn, and we can chat. But yeah, more than welcome to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you. And KJ for 05 Media?
Yep. People can visit 05.media or visit my blog, kjrocker.com, or look for Khawar Jamil or Rasool on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the series via your usual podcast app. And if you want to find out more about this Mind Your Small Business series, you can do so at www.axa.co.uk/podcast. You can also get loads of brilliant small business advice from AXA's Business Guardian Angel site, which is at www.axa.co.uk. And finally, if you think cash flow is unpredictable, just wait until you get to the next topic. Next week's episode is all about human beings. It's all about the employees. So join me, Gordon Rutherford, and another couple of special guests for that one. We look forward to welcoming you, and once again, thank you.